The Trojan War had been won, but the greatest challenge still lay ahead for Odysseus. Before he could even begin his legendary journey home, he needed to secure one final, impossible victory at Troy. This mission hinged on a desperate gamble, recruiting two young men who carried the weight of the greatest names in Greek mythology. Today we uncover the epic story of how Odysseus recruited the sons of Achilles and Heracles, a lesser-known chapter where the fate of a decade-long war rested on the untested shoulders of legendary heirs. You will discover the cunning persuasion and high-stakes diplomacy that finally brought down a city thought to be unconquerable. What secrets did Odysseus use to awaken the dormant power in these legendary bloodlines, and why were they the only keys to victory? When have you found yourself relying on someone else's potential to achieve a critical goal? The Greek victory at Troy felt hollow the moment Achilles fell. His death did more than just rob the army of its greatest warrior, it shattered its spirit. The camp was plunged into chaos and despair, a demoralized force now vulnerable to Trojan counterattacks. They had won the battle, but the war and the city itself remained stubbornly out of reach. It was in this climate of desperation that the Greeks turned to a prisoner for answers. They had captured the Trojan seer Helenus, a prince who saw the future. Under pressure, he revealed a devastating prophecy. The walls of Troy, built by the gods themselves, would never crumble unless a specific condition was met. The city could not fall without the presence and the strength of Achilles' own son, a young man named Neoptolemus. This was a shocking revelation. The Greeks needed a ghost, the living echo of their dead champion. The task of retrieving this heir fell to the one man known for his intellect over his brute force, Odysseus. Agamemnon, the commander of the Greek forces, looked to the master of cunning to journey to the island of Scyros and bring back a boy who had never seen battle. Odysseus was not just fetching a soldier, he was being sent to collect the final, crucial piece of a divine puzzle. The entire decade-long war, the lives of thousands, and the glory of Greece now rested on a single, precarious diplomatic mission. Could words alone convince a young man to step into his father's colossal shadow and sail toward certain danger? This mission was a crucible that perfectly matched the man. Odysseus was known throughout Greece as the man of twists and turns, a title that spoke not just to his long journey home, but to the very nature of his mind. Where other heroes solved problems with a sword, Odysseus wielded intellect and a deep understanding of human nature. His reputation was built on cleverness, not just courage, making him the only commander who could see that the final key to a military victory was not a new weapon, but a persuasive argument delivered to a reluctant boy. He was the architect of the Trojan horse idea, a plan so reliant on deception it would have been unthinkable to a more straightforward warrior like Ajax. For this task of recruiting an heir, brute force was useless. What was needed was a diplomat, a psychologist, and a strategist all in one. Beneath this famed cunning burned a very personal human desperation. Odysseus had been away from his home in Ithaca for 10 long years. He missed his wife, Penelope, and his infant son, Telemachus, who would now be a young man he had never known. Every day spent on the dusty plains of Troy was a day stolen from his own life. This recruitment was not just a military objective for him, it was the most direct path to his own hearth and family. Securing Neoptolemus was the essential first step on his own odyssey home. This personal stake sharpened his resolve, transforming the mission from a duty into a profound imperative. He was not just fighting for Agamemnon's glory or Greek victory, he was fighting for his own future. This is why he was the perfect, if unexpected, choice. The other Greek kings, men of immense pride and physical power, would have likely botched the encounter on Scyros. They might have tried to command, to threaten, or to shame the young Neoptolemus into compliance. Odysseus understood that you cannot threaten a legacy into awakening. It must be coaxed, inspired, and carefully guided. His tools were not threats but words, observant silence, and the powerful allure of a destiny waiting to be claimed. He approached the island not as a general come to conscript a soldier, but as a storyteller arriving to offer a young man the most important role in the final chapter of an epic war. How do you convince someone to embrace a fate they have spent their life sheltered from? The answer lay in the most potent weapon in Odysseus's entire arsenal, his silver tongue. The island of Scyros was a world away from the blood-soaked plains of Troy. Imagine a quiet, sun-drenched sanctuary, a place of gentle sea breezes and sheltered coves, where the greatest conflict of the age was nothing more than a distant, troubling rumor. It was in this peaceful obscurity that Neoptolemus, the son of the great Achilles, had grown into a young man. His mother, Deidamia, had brought him here after his father's death, a desperate act to protect her son from the very war that had claimed his legendary parent. Under the watchful eye of his grandfather, King Lycomedes, the boy was raised not as a warrior prince, but as a nobleman's heir, his days filled with the routines of a peaceful court. He learned to hunt in the island's lush forests and trained in the arts of combat, yet it was always framed as a skill for defense or sport, never for the grim business of a decade-long siege. This was a life crafted to be ordinary, a deliberate shelter from the colossal destiny that pulsed in his bloodline. He was the inheritor of a power he did not yet understand, living a life of pastoral calm while his father's ghost and a waiting war called for him from across the sea. The culture of Scyros was one of measured tranquility, a stark contrast to the brutal, glory-obsessed world of the Greek camp. Here, the greatest concerns were the harvest and the harmony of the palace, not the breaking of city walls or the favor of fickle gods. This upbringing created a profound dissonance within Neoptolemus. He possessed the innate strength and fiery spirit of his father, a latent force that could be felt simmering beneath his composed exterior, yet it was a force without direction or purpose. He was a weapon carefully kept in its scabbard, polished and maintained, but never drawn for its true, devastating purpose. He was, in essence, a king's son being groomed for a quiet life, while the fates had written him a part in an epic tragedy. How does a young man, shaped by peace, reconcile himself with a destiny forged in war? Odysseus was about to arrive and shatter that tranquil illusion forever. Odysseus did not arrive on Scyros with an army or blaring trumpets. He came ashore alone, a solitary figure of weathered leather and bronze, his presence an anomaly on the peaceful beaches. He sought an audience with King Lycomedes, but his true objective was the young prince. When he was finally face to face with Neoptolemus, the master strategist saw immediately the conflict simmering beneath the surface. Here was no ordinary boy, but a caged lion, restless in his gilded prison. Odysseus knew that commands or patriotic pleas would fail. He had to awaken the ghost that haunted this young man's blood. His first move was not a speech, but a presentation. He had his men bring forth a chest, and from it he unveiled the most potent symbol he could possess, the divine armor of Achilles. It was not merely metal and leather, it was a legacy given physical form. The shield, intricately crafted with scenes of life and war, the helmet with its ominous crest, the spear that had slain countless heroes, these were not relics in a museum. They were the very skin of a godlike father. Odysseus held them out not as a gift but as a challenge. He spoke of honor, but not the abstract honor of poets. He spoke of a very specific, tangible honor, the honor of vengeance. He painted a vivid picture of Hector, the Trojan prince who had killed Achilles, and of Paris, whose arrow had struck the fatal blow, both of them still living, still unpunished. He framed the entire Trojan War not as a collective Greek effort, but as Neoptolemus' personal inheritance, a feud he was duty-bound to settle. The internal struggle for the young prince was immense. On one side was the life he knew, a safe and comfortable existence as a respected prince of a quiet island. It was a future of certainty, of peaceful years stretching out before him, but it was also a future of obscurity. He would always be the son of Achilles, yet he would never have done what a son must do. On the other side was a destiny of bloodshed, terror, and almost certain danger. It was the path that had led to his own father's gruesome death. Yet it was also the path to glory, to stepping out of his father's shadow, not by hiding from it, but by filling it. This was the quintessential coming-of-age moment, the point where a boy is presented with the terrifying burden of his own potential, and must choose whether to shoulder it or let it define him from a distance. Odysseus' genius was in making that burden seem not like a weight but like a crown. He offered Neoptolemus a choice, but he framed the options so powerfully that only one could feel like true living. Would he remain a sheltered prince, or would he become a legend? The silence in that chamber must have been deafening, broken only by the clink of his father's armor as the young man reached out to claim his name. Neoptolemus stepped onto the sands of Troy as a paradox wrapped in his father's armor. He possessed the raw, untamed power of Achilles, a strength that seemed to flow not just through his muscles but through his very blood. In battle, he was a force of nature, his fighting spirit so fierce it could rally entire battalions from the brink of despair. Yet this was not a perfect copy of the great hero. Achilles, for all his rage, was a man bound by a complex personal code of honor. He fought for glory, yes, but also for the respect of his peers and the memory of his beloved Patroclus. His famous rage was a tragic flaw, but it was born from a place of deep personal loss and wounded pride. Neoptolemus inherited the rage without the code. He had the fire, but not the hearth that once contained it. His temper was a weapon without a safety, a gift in its ferocity, but a profound curse in its lack of restraint. Where his father might show mercy to a defeated foe or pause for a moment of respect, the son saw only targets. This crucial difference would define his legacy. His sheltered upbringing on Scyros was the crucible that forged this complexity. For years, the stories of his father's deeds were just that, stories. They were epic tales told at feasts, grand and distant. He never witnessed the gritty reality of a long campaign, the weary diplomacy between battles, or the hard-won wisdom that comes from years of leading men. He arrived at Troy with a heart full of legendary expectations and a mind empty of the practical, often brutal, lessons that temper a warrior into a true leader. He was a blade that had been sharpened to a perfect edge in isolation, but never tested against the hard anvil of real war. This combination created a young man desperately eager to prove he was worthy of his name, yet dangerously untempered. He was not trying to live up to his father's nuanced example. He was trying to exceed his father's legend, and in his mind that meant being more decisive, more absolute, and more ruthless. Can a legacy truly be claimed if you only inherit the power and not the principles? The stage was set for Neoptolemus to answer that question not with words, but with actions that would echo through the crumbling streets of Troy. The sea voyage from Scyros was a floating classroom, and Neoptolemus was its most impatient student. He stood at the prow, his father's armor already feeling less like a costume and more like a second skin, his eyes fixed on the horizon as if he could personally command the winds to hurry. Odysseus watched him with a quiet, knowing intensity. The journey was not merely a transit, it was a necessary incubation period, a final chance to temper the young lion before unleashing him upon the plains of Troy. Their conversations were a clash of worldviews. Neoptolemus spoke of glory, of single combat, of the brilliant, decisive moment that would shatter the Trojan line. Odysseus, in his calm and measured way, began to dismantle those fantasies. He did not lecture on honor, he lectured on logistics. He spoke of supply lines and sentry rotations, of the morale of common soldiers who had not seen their homes in a decade, and of the sheer, grinding boredom that defined 99 out of every 100 days of a siege. War, he explained, is not a series of heroic duels. It is a slow, brutal machine, and victory goes to the side that understands its gears and levers, not just the one with the sharpest sword. He tried to impart the most difficult lesson of all, that cunning often achieves what force cannot. He spoke of the need to sometimes appear weak when you are strong, or to retreat today to secure a greater victory tomorrow. To Neoptolemus, reared on tales of his father's invincible frontline charges, these ideas felt like a betrayal of the very concept of heroism. Yet something in the older man's weary, pragmatic wisdom began to seep in. It was the first time anyone had spoken to him not as a legend's son, but as a future commander. Meanwhile, on the Trojan coast, a strange new energy crackled through the Greek camp. The rumor spread like wildfire, a potent cure for a decade of despair. Achilles' son was coming. To the weary, homesick soldiers, this was not merely a reinforcement. It was a resurrection. The spirit of their fallen champion was returning to lead them to final victory. The news had a physical effect, straightening slumped shoulders and hardening weary resolves. They saw in Neoptolemus the living embodiment of their own lost hope, and in the high towers of Troy, that same rumor arrived as a chilling omen. Spies brought word of the young warrior who carried the very spear that had once dominated the battlefield. The name of Achilles, which had for so long been a memory of a threat extinguished, was suddenly spoken again in fearful whispers. They had defeated the father, but now the son was sailing toward them, forged from the same divine fire and burning with a fresh, untamed rage. The entire dynamic of the war shifted before Neoptolemus even set foot on the beach. His arrival was not just a moment, it was an event that tilted the very scales of fate. What kind of warrior would he become under the tutelage of the cleverest mind in Greece? And was the world ready for the fusion of such raw power and ruthless strategy? Yet even with the son of Achilles now in their camp, a shadow of uncertainty lingered over the Greek high command. The prophecy from Helenus had been precise, but it was not the only divine whisper guiding their fate. Another, older strand of destiny was now tugging at the threads of the war, one that reached back to a grievance from a generation before. This was not about the rage of Achilles, but the unfinished business of Heracles, the greatest hero Greece had ever known. Decades earlier, the mighty Heracles had saved the city of Troy from a monstrous sea serpent sent by Poseidon. The king at that time, Laomedon, had promised Heracles a team of divine horses as a reward, a kingly payment for a kingly service. But when the monster was slain, Laomedon brazenly refused to pay. He betrayed Heracles, an act of staggering foolishness that ignited a deep and lasting fury. Heracles returned with a small force, sacked the city, and killed Laomedon, but the debt of vengeance was not fully settled. A curse, a stain of dishonor, lingered on the stones of Troy, and the fates had decreed that only a true blood descendant of Heracles could cleanse it. The city could not truly fall until the line of the man who had been wronged saw justice done. Odysseus, with his meticulous mind, understood that prophecies are not a simple checklist. They are a complex lock, and every piece must slide into place for the mechanism to turn. He had secured one key in Neoptolemus. Now he needed to find the other. His decision to seek out a descendant of Heracles was a masterstroke of strategic thoroughness. It was not enough to have the greatest warrior's son. They also needed the spiritual right of conquest, a legitimacy granted by bloodline and ancient oath. This was about more than just muscle. It was about satisfying the cosmic ledger. Who could this descendant be, and where would Odysseus even begin to look for an heir to such a colossal legacy? The answer lay in a remote and rugged kingdom, where another young prince was living in the long shadow of a legendary father. The search for the second key to Troy's fall led Odysseus far to the south, to the sun-baked island of Rhodes. Here he found not a sheltered boy, but a man who had already forged his own kingdom. Tlepolemus, the son of Heracles and Princess Astyoche, was a king in his own right, a warrior seasoned by battle and the heavy responsibilities of rule. His story was one of tragic accident and triumphant survival. In a fit of rage during a dispute over property, the young Tlepolemus had struck and killed his own granduncle, a beloved elder. Though the act was unintentional, the stain of kinslaying forced him into exile. He gathered followers and sailed across the sea, eventually conquering the island of Rhodes and establishing a powerful city-state there. He was no untested heir. He was a self-made ruler who had built his legacy from the ground up, bearing the immense weight of his father's name not as a burden but as a foundation. This was a crucial difference between the two legendary sons. Neoptolemus was a force of nature being taught to channel his power, while Tlepolemus was a seasoned commander who had already learned to wield his. So why would such an established and successful king leave his hard-won throne to join a war on a distant shore? The motivations for Tlepolemus were deeply personal and woven into the very fabric of the Trojan conflict. Glory was certainly a factor, the eternal fame that came from participating in the greatest war of his age. But more powerfully, there was the call of his father's unfinished business. The story of King Laomedon's betrayal was not just a myth to him, it was a family insult. The dishonor shown to Heracles was a stain he felt duty-bound to cleanse. For Tlepolemus, this was not merely a Greek military campaign, it was a blood feud. He was the living instrument of his father's vengeance, the one who could finally balance the scales of justice that had been tilted decades before. Joining the war was the ultimate act of filial piety, a way to honor Heracles by completing the work the great hero had started. When Odysseus arrived with his silver tongue and his recitation of the prophecy, he did not need to convince a boy to claim his destiny. He needed to propose an alliance to a king who was already poised to act. Odysseus presented the war not as a summons, but as an invitation to cement his legacy, to stand beside the son of Achilles and together fulfill the conditions that would doom the city that had twice earned the wrath of heroes. For Tlepolemus, the decision was clear. This was his birthright, his moment to step onto the world stage and prove that the blood of Heracles had lost none of its power. What would happen when the disciplined fury of a seasoned king met the untamed rage of a young prince on the same battlefield? Odysseus found a very different man waiting for him on the shores of Rhodes. Tlepolemus was no youth wrestling with his identity, but a king who had carved out his own power from the wilderness of exile. His city was a testament to his strength and leadership, a thriving hub built by his own hands and the loyalty of his followers. This was not a mission of awakening, but one of high-stakes diplomacy between equals. Odysseus could not arrive with a chest of legendary armor and tales of a stolen destiny. He had to approach Tlepolemus as one sovereign to another, recognizing the authority and the seasoned wisdom the man possessed. The negotiation that followed was a masterclass in strategic persuasion, tailored perfectly to its audience. Odysseus spoke of honor, but he framed it not as a personal quest for glory, but as a matter of statecraft and familial duty. He reminded Tlepolemus of the ancient grievance, the story every child knew of how the Trojan king Laomedon had swindled and insulted the great Heracles. For Tlepolemus, this was not a dusty old myth. It was a living insult to his bloodline, a debt of dishonor that still demanded payment. Odysseus presented the current war as the final opportunity to settle that account, to forever cleanse the stain of Laomedon's betrayal from the legacy of Heracles. He then revealed the prophecy, weaving Tlepolemus's participation not as a mere reinforcement, but as an essential, divinely mandated component of victory. He was not being asked to fight for Agamemnon. He was being invited to fulfill a cosmic purpose that only he could complete. This appeal resonated on every level with the Rhodian king. It touched his pride as a son, his ambition as a ruler seeking eternal renown, and his strategic mind as a commander who understood the power of a righteous cause. Where Neoptolemus needed to be convinced he was a hero, Tlepolemus only needed to be shown the most consequential battlefield for his heroism. The agreement was likely swift and firm, a pact sealed between two pragmatic leaders who saw the same inevitable conclusion. Tlepolemus would bring his own ships, his own veteran warriors, and his own royal authority to the shores of Troy. He was not a recruit, but an ally joining a grand coalition, the final piece of a divine puzzle that was now, at long last, complete. With the son of Heracles and the son of Achilles united under the same banner, the fate of Priam's city was no longer a matter of if, but when. How would the disciplined king and the fiery prince interact when their legendary bloodlines converged on the same desperate battlefield? The blood of Heracles was not just a matter of lineage for Tlepolemus, it was an inheritance of immense and often conflicting forces. He carried the divine strength of his father, a power that made him a formidable warrior and a natural leader of men, but he also carried the seeds of that legendary, destructive temper. His very life was a testament to this duality. The accidental killing of his granduncle was a tragic eruption of that Heraclean rage, a moment of uncontrolled fury that cost him his homeland and forced him to build a new kingdom from nothing. This experience, however, had tempered him. The King of Rhodes was not a man ruled by his anger, but one who had learned through exile and responsibility to harness it. He understood the weight of his own power in a way that the younger Neoptolemus was only beginning to grasp. His leadership was not the raw, magnetic pull of a demigod, but the earned authority of a commander who had weathered storms both at sea and within his own soul. This hard-won control made him a pillar of stability in the chaotic final act at Troy, yet the fire beneath the surface still burned, waiting for the right moment to be unleashed. That moment was the betrayal of Laomedon. For Tlepolemus, this was not ancient history, it was a personal and festering wound. The insult to his father was an insult to him, a stain on his family's honor that transcended generations. While other Greek kings fought for the return of Helen or for the glory of conquest, Tlepolemus fought for something far more primal, a crusade of vengeance. This singular focus made him a uniquely terrifying asset on the battlefield. He was not there for plunder or for songs to be sung in his halls. He was there to settle a debt. Every Trojan soldier he faced was, in his eyes, a proxy for the treacherous Laomedon. This personal stake granted him a relentless, almost inexhaustible determination. He did not just want to defeat Troy, he needed to erase the dishonor from his father's memory, to prove that the line of Heracles would always, eventually, collect what it was owed. How does a man fight when his cause is not just duty, but a sacred, familial obligation written in the stars? He fights with the unwavering conviction that he is not merely a participant in a war, but the instrument of a cosmic justice delayed for decades. This righteous fury, channeled through the disciplined mind of a seasoned king, made Tlepolemus the final, perfect storm that would break against Troy's weary walls. The Greek camp hummed with a new kind of energy, a tension that felt both hopeful and dangerous. When the Rhodian fleet finally dropped anchor, all eyes turned to the shore. Two distinct auras now pulsed through the army, a palpable vibration that every soldier could feel. From one direction came the crackling, untamed fire of Neoptolemus, a force that demanded attention and promised glorious, chaotic action. From the other came the deep, resonant hum of Tlepolemus, the steady and vengeful strength of a king who had already seen his share of war. Their first meeting was not a clash, but a careful, measured appraisal. They stood as living monuments to their fathers, two different answers to the same impossible question of how to carry a legendary name. Neoptolemus, in his father's ill-fitting armor, likely saw in Tlepolemus a reflection of the commander he was struggling to become, a man who had already built a kingdom from his own resolve. Tlepolemus, weathered and pragmatic, would have seen in the young prince the ghost of his own youthful fury, a raw power that needed direction, not suppression. There was no room for traditional rivalry here, not when their very presence was a condition for victory. The shared burden of their bloodlines created an immediate, unspoken alliance. They were not competing for the same glory. Neoptolemus sought to build a name, while Tlepolemus sought to settle a debt. Their strengths were not identical, they were complementary. Imagine the young lion and the seasoned wolf, each hunting in their own style but both focused on the same prey. The Greek soldiers watched this convergence with a kind of reverent awe. They now had the son of Achilles, the army's reclaimed spirit, and the son of Heracles, the bringer of divine justice. It was as if the past had sent its greatest champions to personally oversee the end. This was no longer just a besieging army. It was a gathering storm composed of two separate, powerful fronts about to collide with the walls of Troy. How would these two legendary forces, one a sharpened blade and the other a heavy hammer, work in concert to finally break a city that had withstood a decade of assault? A palpable shift swept through the Greek camp the moment the two legendary sons stood side by side. For 10 long years, these soldiers had endured a grinding war of attrition, their spirits worn thin by the monotonous cycle of siege and stalemate. The death of Achilles had been a devastating blow, a wound that never truly healed, leaving behind a lingering sense of futility. But now something miraculous had happened. The presence of Neoptolemus and Tlepolemus was not merely the arrival of two powerful warriors, it was a resurrection of the army's very soul. The camp, once filled with the weary silence of men counting lost years, now buzzed with animated conversation and the sharpening of swords with renewed purpose. The scent of roasting meat from celebratory feasts replaced the usual odor of dust and despair. Men who had spoken only of home now spoke of victory, their eyes alight with a fire that had been extinguished for a decade. They saw in Neoptolemus the ghost of their fallen champion, a second chance to follow the invincible standard of Achilles into battle, and in Tlepolemus they saw the unyielding justice of Heracles, a promise that every betrayal would be answered and every debt paid in full. This was a psychological renaissance, a collective decision to believe that the end was finally within reach. How does an army rediscover its will to fight after such exhaustion? It finds a symbol, or in this case, two living symbols powerful enough to make the struggle feel noble again. Across the plain, within the high walls of Troy, the very same sight had the opposite effect. Trojan sentries watching from the ramparts did not just see two new enemy commanders, they saw their worst fears given human form. The news spread through the city in terrified whispers. Achilles has returned in the body of his son. Heracles has sent his heir to finish what he started. The morale of the Trojan defenders, which had held firm for so long, began to fracture under the weight of this divine pressure. They had fought a long war against men, but now they faced the chilling certainty that they were fighting against fate itself. The arrival of these young heroes was a weapon that struck at the heart of Trojan hope, proving that the gods had indeed chosen their final instruments and that the walls were no longer a guarantee of safety. The final assault on Troy was not a single event but a storm of individual clashes, and at its violent heart was Neoptolemus. The prophecy demanded his presence, but it was his own untamed fury that gave that presence meaning. He did not fight with the measured, almost artistic grace of his father, Achilles, who could find a kind of terrible beauty in single combat. Neoptolemus fought with a raw, desperate savagery, as if he were trying to kill the ghost of his father's killer with every Trojan soldier he faced. He was a whirlwind of bronze and rage, cutting a path through the enemy ranks not for strategy but for catharsis. His fighting style was brutally efficient, devoid of the chivalrous pauses or respectful challenges that sometimes marked heroic duels of the past. For him, every moment the war continued was an insult to his father's memory, and he intended to end it with overwhelming, merciless force. The prophecy had called for the son of Achilles, but the Greeks got something far more terrifying, a force of nature that did not understand restraint. His value was proven not in a vague, spiritual sense, but in one of the war's most pivotal and bloody encounters. The Trojans, desperate to counter this new threat, had summoned their own legendary reinforcement, a mighty warrior named Eurypylus. He was a son of the hero Telephus, a man of immense strength and royal blood who arrived with a fresh army from Mysia. Eurypylus was a hero in the old style, a champion who strode onto the battlefield and began to turn the tide, cutting down Greek warriors with terrifying ease. He was the equalizer, the Trojan answer to the problem of Neoptolemus. The Greek lines began to waver under his assault, and the hope that had surged with the arrival of their new heroes started to flicker. In that critical moment, the entire war narrowed to a single, brutal confrontation. Neoptolemus, seeing the Greek line falter, locked his sights on Eurypylus. This was no longer a battle between armies, but a clash of destinies. The young prince, burning with all his inherited power and personal rage, charged. The fight was not a long, poetic exchange of speeches and blows. It was a savage, close-quarters struggle, a testament to Neoptolemus's ferocious style. He pressed Eurypylus relentlessly, giving him no quarter, no moment to breathe or boast. With a final, devastating strike, Neoptolemus slew the Trojan champion. The death of Eurypylus was more than a military victory. It was a psychological cataclysm for Troy. Their last great hope, the hero who was meant to save them, was broken by the very boy whose presence had been foretold. In that moment, the prophecy became undeniable reality. The walls did not need to physically crumble for the city's spirit to be shattered. By defeating Eurypylus, Neoptolemus did not just win a battle, he proved the seer Helenus right beyond all doubt. He was the key, and with his most dangerous opponent dead, the final, grim path into the city was now unlocked. While the fury of Neoptolemus dominated the field, the son of Heracles was waging his own, equally consequential war. Tlepolemus did not fight for the roar of the crowd, but for the quiet satisfaction of a debt being collected. He led his Rhodian warriors not as a detached general, but as a king fighting in the front ranks, his presence a steadying anchor in the chaos. Where Neoptolemus was a wildfire, Tlepolemus was a forge fire, intense, controlled, and focused on a single purpose. He would have sought out the champions of Troy, not for personal glory, but to systematically dismantle their command structure and break their will to resist. His strategic value was immense, applying relentless, disciplined pressure on the Trojan lines, creating the openings that the more volatile Neoptolemus could exploit. In some versions of the myth, his quest for a worthy opponent leads him to one of the most formidable figures in the Trojan army, the Lycian king Sarpedon. A son of Zeus himself, Sarpedon was a pillar of the Trojan defense, a warrior of immense strength and noble bearing. Their confrontation would have been a clash of titanic lineages, a son of Heracles against a son of Zeus. Though the epic poets differ on the outcome, the very possibility of such a duel illustrates the caliber of hero Tlepolemus was destined to face. He fought with the unyielding strength of his father, each blow delivered not just with muscle, but with the weight of generations, a final answer to Laomedon's ancient betrayal. His contribution, though less chronicled in vivid detail, was the other half of the winning formula. He was the anvil against which the Trojan defense was broken. How does a war end when it is attacked by both untamed storm and immovable mountain? It ends with the certain, crushing finality of fate fulfilled. The wooden horse stood silent on the shore, a monstrous sculpture of shadow and timber against the fading sky. Inside its hollow belly, the air was thick with the scent of sweat, oiled leather, and the shared breath of elite warriors holding perfectly still. Among them, Neoptolemus crouched in the darkness, his father's armor cold against his skin. This was the culmination of everything, the final, brilliant lie spun by Odysseus that would either end the war or become their collective tomb. His selection for this clandestine mission was the ultimate testament to his newfound value. He was not merely a blunt instrument to be hurled at the gates anymore. He was a key component in a machine of deception. For the young prince, this was a crucible that tested more than just his courage. It tested his ability to master the very stillness he had spent his life on Scyros learning to despise. The hours dragged by in an agonizing silence, broken only by the distant, fading sounds of celebration from the city. every creak of the wooden frame, every muffled footstep outside was a potential death sentence. He could feel the restless energy of the other heroes around him, a coiled tension that mirrored the storm of impatience in his own heart. This was the perfect fusion of Odyssean cunning and Herculean power, a plan that required the discipline to wait in the dark just as much as the fury to erupt into the light. The contrast must have been almost unbearable for him. After a lifetime of being sheltered from action, and then weeks of unleashing his rage on the battlefield, he was now forced into the most profound inaction, his legendary strength rendered useless until the precise moment it was needed. This was the final lesson Odysseus had to teach him, that true power lies not just in the force of the blow, but in the strategic patience required to deliver it at the perfect time. When the trap was finally sprung and the hatch opened onto a city drunk on false victory, Neoptolemus would have been the first to surge into the chaos, his long-suppressed fury exploding into the Trojan night. The sheltered prince was gone, replaced by a seasoned warrior stepping into his destined role as the harbinger of Troy's final, bloody dawn. The darkness inside the horse gave way to an even deeper darkness within the city. As the Greek warriors poured into the unsuspecting streets of Troy, the celebration of a false victory curdled into the raw chaos of a massacre. And at the forefront of that storm was Neoptolemus, his father's rage finally unleashed without any walls to contain it. The disciplined soldier who had waited in silence was gone, replaced by a force of vengeance that recognized no sanctuary and no surrender. His most infamous act would not occur on the battlefield, but in the most sacred space of the city, the royal palace itself. He hunted down the aged King Priam, who had sought refuge at the altar of Zeus Heracles, the protector of the hearth and supplicants. The old king clung to the stone, believing the god's sanctity would be his shield. But Neoptolemus saw not a helpless elder, but the father of Hector, the man who had killed Achilles. In a single, brutal motion, he dragged Priam from the altar and slew him upon the very steps, defiling a place meant to be safe for all. The act was so shockingly sacrilegious that it silenced the fighting around him. Even the most hardened Greek warriors felt a chill, understanding that some lines once crossed change a man forever. This was not the glory of a hero, but the fury of a ghost, and it cemented a reputation for brutality that would follow Neoptolemus for the rest of his days. His vengeance did not stop with the king. The Greeks, fearing that the son of their greatest foe would one day seek to rebuild Troy and avenge his father, made a grim decision. The life of the child Astyanax, Hector's young son, and the last hope of the Trojan royal line had to be extinguished. The task of carrying out this merciless order fell to Neoptolemus. In some accounts, he is the one who personally tears the infant from his mother's arms and hurls him from the high walls of the city. It is a moment of profound tragedy, the final, chilling symbol of a war that consumed the innocent along with the guilty. How does a legacy built on such an act differ from the one his father left behind? Achilles fought warriors, but his son destroyed a dynasty, root and stem. And from the ashes of the city, Neoptolemus claimed his prizes of war. Among them was the Trojan princess Polyxena, a haunting figure whose story is tightly bound to the memory of his own father. In a cruel twist of fate, the ghost of Achilles was said to have demanded her sacrifice upon his tomb as his rightful share of the spoils, a final, posthumous tribute to his glory. Neoptolemus, as the heir, would have been the one to oversee this ritual killing, binding the beginning of his story to the tragic end of another. These actions, the murder of a supplicant king, the killing of a child, and the ritual sacrifice of a princess, paint a stark portrait of the darker side of Greek heroism. This was not the clean, glorious victory of song, but a messy, brutal conclusion where the lines between justice, vengeance, and sheer atrocity were blurred beyond recognition. The young man who left Scyros to claim a name had forged one in the fires of a dying city, but it was a name that would forever be alloyed with the grim reality of what it took to truly end a war. While Neoptolemus carved his bloody path through the city, another duel of legendary significance was unfolding on the battlefield. The son of Heracles, Tlepolemus, finally found the worthy opponent he had sought, the Lycian captain Sarpedon. Here was a confrontation written in the stars, a son of Zeus facing a son of Heracles. They were not merely two commanders clashing, they were the embodiments of their divine father's power, a conflict of epic lineages converging in the dust of Troy. The air around them would have crackled with the weight of their heritage, each blow carrying the echo of a god's strength. Tlepolemus fought with the focused fury of a king settling a generation's-old debt, his every strike a declaration that the betrayal of Laomedon would be answered. Sarpedon met him with the noble, terrifying power bestowed by his father, the king of the gods. It was a battle that could have swung the fate of the entire war, a contest of titans on a human scale. The clash was undoubtedly brutal and magnificent, a fitting end for heroes of their stature. Yet, in many versions of the myth, this is where Tlepolemus' story meets its tragic conclusion. Despite his immense strength and righteous cause, he fell before Sarpedon, slain by the very son of Zeus. His death was not a failure, but a fulfillment. He had come to Troy to honor his father Heracles and cleanse the stain of an old dishonor, and by engaging in this ultimate, heroic struggle, he achieved that goal. He died as a king and a champion, his vengeance complete through his sacrifice. His end served as a stark, sobering reminder to the victorious Greeks that the cost of victory was immense and paid in blood by all, even by the sons of gods. The war demanded a price from every side, and Tlepolemus, having given everything to see Troy fall, paid his in full on the point of a divine rival's spear. How do we measure a hero's life? By the glory of his victories or the honor of his final, fatal stand? The sons of legends did not merely inherit power, they inherited a profound and often impossible standard. Achilles, for all his world-shaking rage, was a man bound by a personal code. His fury at Agamemnon was about wounded honor, and his grief for Patroclus spoke of a deep human capacity for love. In a moment of startling clarity amidst the bloodshed, he even showed pity, returning the body of his greatest enemy, Hector, to the broken King Priam. His violence was terrible, but it was framed by moments of tragic humanity. Neoptolemus, his son, possessed the rage but seemingly none of the code. Where Achilles saw a fellow king in Priam, Neoptolemus saw only a target. His murder of the old man at the altar of Zeus was not an act of honor, but of pure, efficient eradication. He surpassed his father in ruthless efficacy, yet he failed to grasp the complex soul that made Achilles a figure of tragedy, not just terror. Can a son truly live up to a legacy if he only embodies the shadow of his father's power and not the substance of his heart? A similar, yet different, dynamic defined the legacy of Heracles and his son. Heracles' life was a sprawling epic of transgression and atonement. His famous labors were not a quest for vengeance, but a divinely mandated path to purification for the terrible acts he committed in a madness sent by the gods. His story is one of overcoming monstrous flaws, a journey toward redemption that gave his strength a deeply moral dimension. Tlepolemus, by contrast, channeled his inherited strength into a single, focused purpose, cleansing the dishonor of Laomedon's betrayal. His was a streamlined, almost purer form of vengeance, unburdened by his father's complicated history of sin and penance. He fought with the same Herculean power, but he applied it like a surgical instrument to settle a specific, generations-old debt. In this, he fulfilled a crucial aspect of his father's will, yet his story lacks the transformative arc that defines Heracles. He was the unwavering instrument of justice, while his father was the flawed hero who had to learn what justice truly meant. These contrasting legacies force us to ask a difficult question about what it means to be a hero's heir. Is the goal to replicate the father exactly, or to use his power to meet the demands of a new and different world? Neoptolemus and Tlepolemus were not given the luxury of their father's long, defining journeys. They were forged in the final, desperate act of a decade-long war where nuance was often the first casualty. They provided the precise, brutal force required to break a stalemate that their more complex fathers might have prolonged. In doing so, they secured a victory, but they also demonstrated the inherent tragedy of inherited glory. A legacy is not a finished sculpture to be admired, but a block of marble that each generation must carve anew, often with their own flaws and compromises etched permanently into the stone. The sons brought the war to its necessary end, but the cost was a piece of their own humanity, leaving us to wonder if the weight of a legendary name inevitably crushes the very qualities that made it legendary in the first place. Odysseus' recruitment of the two legendary sons stands as a masterwork of strategic foresight, a victory of the mind that proved just as decisive as any battlefield charge. While the Trojan horse would later become the iconic symbol of his cunning, this earlier, quieter mission was its intellectual equal. He understood that a prophecy was not a simple instruction, but a complex lock requiring specific living keys. His genius lay in recognizing that those keys were not just weapons to be collected, but wills to be carefully turned. With Neoptolemus, he appealed to a young man's desperate need for identity, framing a terrifying war as the only path to claiming a birthright. With Tlepolemus, he shifted to the language of kings and honor, presenting the conflict as the final settlement of a royal debt. In both cases, he did not command, he persuaded, tailoring his approach with a psychologist's precision. This was not a secondary task, it was the essential precondition for everything that followed. Without the son of Achilles, the Greek army would have remained a demoralized shell, its spirit broken. Without the son of Heracles, their victory would have lacked the cosmic legitimacy, the sense of divine right needed to finally break the Trojan will. The other Greek kings possessed strength, but only Odysseus possessed the vision to see that the war's end depended not on finding a better fighter, but on awakening the right legends. His journey to Scyros and Rhodes was the true turning point, the moment he masterfully assembled the final, crucial pieces of a puzzle that had confounded the entire Greek army for a decade. It cemented his legacy as the architect of victory, the man who proved that the sharpest weapon in any war is a deep and cunning understanding of the human heart. The blood on his hands from Troy's altars did not wash off so easily. Neoptolemus, now burdened with the title of king, found that the violence which won him a city could not build him a stable kingdom. His journey home was not the straightforward return of a conquering hero, but a troubled voyage marked by curses and divine disfavor. The gods, angered by his sacrilege in murdering King Priam at their own altar, scattered his fleet and delayed his arrival for years. When he finally reached the shores of Thea, his father's homeland, he did not find a peaceful throne awaiting him. He had to seize it, his reign beginning as it would continue through force and contention. The man who had been forged in the final, brutal hour of a long war did not know how to rule in a time of peace. His leadership was one of command, not consensus, a style that sowed resentment among his own people and neighboring kingdoms. The very rage that made him the key to Troy's destruction now became the flaw that ensured his own kingdom would never know tranquility. How does a warrior built for a single, cataclysmic moment learn to govern the slow, quiet passage of days? For Neoptolemus, the answer was that he could not. His most fateful decision was to claim a bride who was already promised, a choice that wove him into a web of conflict with the most dangerous family in Greece. He married Hermione, the beautiful daughter of Helen and Menelaus. In his mind, this union was a final piece of his triumphant legacy, marrying into the very family whose honor the war had been fought to restore. But Hermione had been pledged from childhood to another man, her cousin Orsts, the son of Agamemnon. This was not merely a personal insult, it was a profound political challenge. Orsts was a figure haunted by his own horrific past, having avenged his father's murder by killing his own mother, Clytemnestra. He was a man teetering on the edge of sanity, clinging to the few rights and honors he had left. By taking Hermione, Neoptolemus stole more than a wife. He stole a symbol of Orst's rightful place in the world. He had navigated the politics of war with Odysseus as his guide, but he completely misjudged the politics of peace, underestimating the obsessive vengeance a man like Orst would nurture. This final confrontation came at Delphi, the spiritual heart of Greece. Neoptolemus traveled there, some say to seek forgiveness from the god Apollo for his past crimes, particularly the murder of Priam. But the past has a long reach. Orst, whether by fate or design, was also at the sanctuary. What happened next was a violent echo of Neoptolemus's own most infamous act. Just as he had cornered the old and defenseless Priam at an altar, Orst now cornered him within the sacred precincts of Delphi. In a brutal, close-quarters struggle, Orst struck him down, killing the son of Achilles on the very steps of the temple. The location was no coincidence. His death at a place of supplication and peace was a direct, poetic punishment for the life he had lived. The man who defiled an altar to satisfy his rage was ultimately destroyed at an altar, his own plea for purification going unanswered. His story ends not on a glorious battlefield, but in a sacred space stained once more with his blood. A tragic full circle close that suggests the violence he unleashed at Troy could only ever circle back to claim him in the end. Odysseus watched the smoke rise from the ashes of Troy, his greatest diplomatic victory now complete. The recruitment of Neoptolemus and Tlepolemus had been the final, essential move in a 10-year game. The masterstroke that unlocked the city gates and finally, mercifully, allowed him to turn his ships toward Ithaca. His mind, which had so carefully orchestrated the convergence of those two legendary bloodlines, was now free to focus on a single, deeply personal objective: home. The long journey chronicled in the Odyssey begins here, at the moment his cleverness paid its ultimate dividend. But the very nature of that cleverness, the same silver tongue that awakened a prince and persuaded a king, would become a double-edged sword on the voyage home. Was the cunning that secured his departure from Troy the same force that would both save him from monsters and shipwreck him on strange shores? His intellect was his greatest asset, a tool for survival, yet it was also a compulsion that often led him to push too far, to seek one more advantage, to unravel one more secret. He left the burning city as the architect of its fall, a hero whose mind had solved an impossible problem. He would soon discover that the journey home would present a series of even more personal and perilous puzzles, each one testing whether his celebrated wit could navigate the treacherous waters between a clever deception and a catastrophic mistake. The man who convinced others to embrace their destiny now faced a decade-long struggle to reclaim his own. The story of these legendary sons is far more than a forgotten chapter in a long war. It is a profound exploration of the very engine that drives Greek mythology, the crushing weight of a name. Achilles and Heracles were titans who walked the earth, men whose personal struggles defined an era. Their sons, however, arrived in a world where the grand personal quests were over, and only the messy business of ending things remained. This is the essence of a post-heroic age, where the goal is not to achieve glory for oneself, but to meticulously tie up the loose ends left by greater men. Neoptolemus and Tlepolemus were not heroes on their own journeys. They were living instruments, their purpose preordained by prophecies and ancient grievances. Their heroism was not one of choice, but of grim necessity, a forced march into a destiny they had not chosen. This passing of the torch was less a celebration and more an inheritance of burden. When Odysseus awakened Neoptolemus, he was not merely recruiting a soldier, he was activating a generational curse. The rage of Achilles did not die with him on the plains of Troy. It lay dormant, waiting for a new vessel to carry it to its bloody conclusion. Similarly, Tlepolemus did not decide to fight for Greece out of patriotism. He answered a call that was decades old, the unresolved echo of his father's righteous anger. Their inclusion in the war represents the fulfillment of cosmic debts, a theme as old as the myths themselves. The gods and the fates demand balance, and justice in the Greek world is not a personal matter. It is a familial one, a chain of cause and effect that binds fathers to sons across generations. This cyclical nature of violence is the story's most haunting lesson. The war began with a betrayal, the abduction of Helen, and it ended with a series of betrayals that echoed that original sin. The vengeance of the Greeks, channeled through the sons of their greatest heroes, was so absolute that it itself became a new source of future conflict. Neoptolemus, by defiling sacred altars and killing a supplicant king, ensured his own life would be cut short by similar treachery. The violence he unleashed did not end at the Scaean gates. It simply entered a new phase, with himself as the next target. This is the tragic depth the sons bring to the Trojan War's finale. Their presence transforms the fall of Troy from a simple military victory into a necessary, yet deeply unsettling act of cosmic housecleaning. They were the final human pieces required to close a divine ledger, proving that in the world of myth, no debt goes unpaid and no legend truly dies. It only finds a new, younger body to inhabit. The myths of these legendary sons echo across a landscape that was very much real. The windswept hill of Hisarlik in modern-day Turkey is widely accepted as the site of ancient Troy, and excavations there reveal a city that knew conflict. Archaeologists have identified multiple layers of settlement, one of which, known as Troy 7, shows clear signs of violent destruction around the time the Trojan War is thought to have occurred. We find not the god-built walls of Homeric epic, but formidable stone fortifications that were breached and burned. There is evidence of a sudden, catastrophic fire and sling stones stockpiled on the roofs of houses, suggesting a city preparing for a desperate last stand. This was not a 10-year siege fought by demigods, but a brutal, real-world conflict where a wealthy trading city was likely sacked by seafaring raiders from the Greek world. So where do figures like Neoptolemus and Tlepolemus fit into this historical picture? They are likely composite characters, narrative vessels created to explain complex political realities of a later age. The story of Neoptolemus, for instance, may be a mythical explanation for the historical migration of peoples. After the collapse of the Bronze Age civilizations, Greek tribes moved into new territories. The epic tale of Achilles' son settling in Epirus and founding a royal line could be a way for later Greeks to legitimize their rule over these lands, claiming descent from a hero of the Trojan War. It was a powerful political tool, connecting a current king to the glorious, semi-divine past. Similarly, Tlepolemus and his colonization of Rhodes might reflect the real-world foundation of Greek colonies across the Mediterranean. His story provides a divine justification and a heroic pedigree for a community's origins, turning a messy historical migration into a fated epic journey. These myths were not just entertainment, they were the living history and political science of the ancient Greeks, a way to make sense of their world, their borders, and their place in it by anchoring it all in the timeless age of heroes. Odysseus's desperate recruitment mission became the quiet masterstroke that sealed Troy's fate. He understood that prophecies are not commands, but intricate puzzles waiting for the right pieces to be set in motion. By awakening the dormant power in Neoptolemus and calling upon the seasoned vengeance of Tlepolemus, he provided the Greek army with more than just two formidable warriors. He gave them a restored spirit and a divine right to conquest, fulfilling the precise cosmic conditions that the walls themselves could not withstand. This was not a victory of brute force alone, but a triumph of intellect, a testament to the cleverness required to weave the disparate threads of destiny into a single, unbreakable cord strong enough to strangle a city. The saga forces us to reflect on the very nature of legacy. Is it a blessing to carry a legendary name, or is it an inescapable burden that dictates your path? These sons were not free to carve their own stories. They were instruments of a conclusion written by their fathers' lives and deaths. Their glory was inseparable from their function, their personal identities forever overshadowed by the colossal shadows they were born to fill. So we leave you with this question: if you faced an impossible challenge, which son of a legend would you want standing by your side? The untamed, ferocious power of a Neoptolemus, or the disciplined, focused vengeance of a Tlepolemus? Let us know your choice in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the untold stories of Greek mythology, be sure to subscribe for more journeys into the epic